slash, well, kind of my favorite slash least favorite song ever. Pornography Will Murder You. The one that makes it really awkward. My mother gives the CD to her friends. Here it is. And this is one, I remember I'd hated pornography for a long time, but still kept looking at it until finally one day, the Lord made me confess to my mom. Like, I'd confessed in public a couple times, but finally just kind of like had to say, Mom, I need you to know that when I confess lust, like what I mean specifically is pornography and masturbation. I tell her that too. That's just awkward to tell your mother. So I told her, and it was weird because I kind of expected she'd be, you know, wouldn't take it well, because, you know, sometimes girls don't tend to, I don't know, whatever. I say they don't take it well, but they probably take it exactly the way they should. And instead of her being upset or anything, she just like started weeping. And I remember I turned to leave the room. I was sitting on the couch in Mom and Dad's living room. I turned to leave. I was like, okay, I'm not going to sit here and just watch this. This is weird and awkward. And it was like the Lord wouldn't let me, you know, and not even just wouldn't let me leave. It's like I could tell he was just saying, like, stay and watch. And so I like turned and just like had to watch her face. And it sucked, because what I realized was happening is I was watching my mother grieve my sin the way that I was intended to grieve my sin. And I had to watch somebody else vicariously grieve my sin for me. And so it was kind of cool, because it was one thing the Lord really used to, you know, begin really building up a hatred for this sin. That's one thing I find. I sin passionately and I repent passively. You know, like when I'm sinning, I'm like no holds barred, running from the Lord. But when I repent, it's like I want Him to be nice to me and, well, Lord, I'm real sorry, you know. But like I freaking re-crucified the Son of God. You know, like there's no passivity. There's no me requesting mercy. If He gives it, then that's great. You know, if He like, which He always does. He does it gracefully. But it's like I need to always be repenting, keeping in mind that justice requires hell for each individual sin, not just my sin as a whole. And like, it was just a really cool thing to learn that with this song. Really just trying to declare the weight and the hideousness of the sin of lust and what it means. You know, that it's like, it's not just, oh, it's my mind. I mean, Jesus is the one who came and blew the doors wide open with lust when He said, you've heard, don't look lustfully, or, you know, don't commit adultery, you know, against your wife or with a woman. But I say, you looked at one with lust, you committed adultery with her already. You know, He said, rape can be in your thought life as much as it can be in your actions. You know, just like, bam. I mean, that's exactly, it's almost like He looked ahead a couple thousand years and was like, I see internet coming up, or maybe hundreds of years, and I see art coming up that people are going to paint a lot of naked pictures, and that's going to produce magazines, and eventually, you know, the internet will come, it'll make it so accessible that it's just, that it becomes so widespread and rampant that it gets into the church. And so it's cool though, because there's a song, clearly, you know, by the end it's about how hideous pornography is, but really what it culminates in is just a grace that outweighs my capacity to sin against it. You know, it just talks about the woman in John 8. We were celebrating her the other day, especially being Christmas time, thinking about how Jesus knew how to deal with this woman in John 8 because He watched His father, or because He'd heard the story about His father dealing with His mother 30 years before. Here's this woman basically caught in the act of adultery by being pregnant. You know, comes back to town after being with her cousin Elizabeth and says, I'm a virgin. God did it. You know, and obviously nobody believed her, and Joseph said, well, I'm going to divorce her quietly, which was amazing. He could have accused her and stoned her, and just decided not to, and then all of a sudden He like kind of, in essence, doesn't let her off the hook, but I mean just gives some grace. And then 30 years later Jesus is presented with this woman, and the man should have been there too, and he clearly knows that justice is not being served, and these Pharisees are just doing all they can to catch him, and they have no intention of finding truth in this issue. And they say, what do you say? The law of Moses says we should stone her. And he just leans down and just tries to piss them off by scribbling in the dirt. And I hear people say a lot of times, like, well, he was scribbling their sins or this or that or whatever. And I just like to think he just got down there and doodled. You know, like, here's all these guys coming up and like, oh, what do we do? There's this big theological issue. And he's like, I'm going to draw a flower in the sand just to upset you. you know, and then they're like, hey, answer us. And finally he just says, oh, my bad, I forgot you were here. Oh yeah, the one without any sin. Why don't you cast the first stone? Which is beautiful and ironic at the same time, because the only man who ever existed who was without sin, could have and should have thrown a stone, was sitting there scribbling in the dirt. And instead of doing so, he says, hey woman, they don't condemn you, neither do I. Well, first he says, where'd they go? Who's here left to condemn you? And she says, no one, Lord. And it's funny because I heard this story being a story of grace my whole life. They're like, oh, Jesus lets her off the hook. You're like, no, lust isn't a big deal. But it's almost like everybody forgets the way this story ends. Jesus says, if they don't condemn you, I don't either. My grace is bigger than your sin. And then he says something beautiful. And it's the beautiful line between legalism and liberalism. The liberals want to say, oh, grace, grace, grace. And legalists want to say, oh, no, we got a holiness, holiness, holiness. And Jesus comes and he says, I got so much grace, I'm going to let you off the hook. But here's the understanding. Go and never sin again. Remember this grace. Appreciate it so much that anytime you're tempted to sin, that it makes the sin hideous, because you find a grace that's more beautiful than sin. So go and sin no more. So this is Pornography Will Murder You. Throw a G sharp in the bass, so open, put that ring finger up there on that one, and then that easily goes into an F sharp minor, and then you're going to be just hitting that top string twice on the 2nd fret, and then like a hammer-on open C. Pornography will murder you, and then I'll go and marry your wife. That's you, and it'll sleep with her most every night. Pornography's a prostitute, and yet you let it father your children. Satan told you it's a secret, yet it's openly molesting your everything. Your friends, your soul, your personality. It goes to the D, your wife, your kids, and your insanity. You sold your own self into slavery. Sold our own selves into slavery. I love to say we're all just fine, cause we're forgiven. Got 16 smiles as we rape women on our computer screens. I'm afraid it's not the case, cause heaven's gate's just not a place for those of us who aren't repentant. So come and mourn, let's grieve our sin like we're in labor. So we're convinced without a savior, we're the devil's sons. Still don't seem right that heaven there got crucified and make our scarlet letters white. Give us life. So that was D to A, back to D, and then that F sharp minor with the hit in the bass note. Grace grant a man's gratitude that's great. A grace this grant a man's gratitude that's great. I said a grace this grant a man's gratitude that's great. Well, a grace this grant a man's gratitude that's great is great. So it's going to be D to A 3 times, and then E, F sharp minor, E to D. You're going to stay on the D. Now here's where we hit the bridge. Jesus looked up and said to her, woman, where are you? That's not it. Where's this part yet? The chords are going to be D, A, E, F sharp minor. Forced into the temple walls, with all of those who think themselves holiest, dragging us by the arms. We're all pushed to the ground, and the nation was the only sound our ears were trained to hear, or so we thought. Till a man who falls sick of this story will name a lie. He bent and scribbled in the dirt and pissed off all those physically pious. He bent to catch our eye, said, "You're a adultery child, that's mine." And 100,000 stones all over the very same song. They sing, going to liberation of 1,000 dead men risen, of 1,000 hearts purified by grace. It's yet to find its living soul. Going to liberation of 1,000 dead men risen, of 1,000 hearts purified by grace. It's yet to find its living soul. All of your accusers have now dropped their stones, and they have walked away. They have walked away. They have walked away. They have walked away. Jesus looked up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? 'Cause no one condemned you." And she said, Jesus looked up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? 'Cause no one condemned you." And she said, "No one, Lord, no one, Lord, no one, Lord, oh, no one, Lord, no one, no one, Lord, no one, Lord, no one, Lord, no one, Lord, oh, no one, Lord, no one, Lord." Peace on you, oh, no sin no more. Peace on you. Peace on you, oh, no sin no more. Peace on you, oh, peace on you, oh, no sin no more. Peace on you, oh, peace on you, oh, no sin no more. Peace on you, oh, peace on you, oh.